He raised his glass and smiled, the kind of smile people use to hide cruelty. "To Riley," Walter said. "May she finally have a stable family, something her sister could never give her." Laughter rippled through the ballroom. I didn't laugh. My name is Clarinda Petton, and the man humiliating me in front of 200 guests was about to learn what it costs to bury the truth. For 20 years, I carried the silence of a collapsed mine and the weight of parents who never came home. Today, the ground beneath his feet was about to crack. The ballroom shimmered beneath the glass roof, every chandelier catching reflections of snow from the mountains outside. Laughter drifted through the air, polished and hollow, the kind that belonged to people who had never known loss. The jazz band played something light, meant to fill the pauses between empty compliments. I sat at the farthest table, half hidden behind crystal centerpieces and candlelight, watching my sister glow in her white gown. Riley's smile trembled slightly, a flicker of nerves no one else noticed. At the head table, Walter Harrington stood, all charm and command, his glass raised as if blessing the world. "Here's to Riley," he said, his voice slicing through the room. "A lovely young woman who will finally have a stable family, something she clearly never had growing up." A ripple of uneasy laughter followed. Someone clinked a glass too loudly. Someone else cleared their throat. Riley froze, her hand gripping the edge of the tablecloth. I didn't move. My eyes tracked the glint of red wine swirling in his glass, catching the chandelier light like blood. When I stood, chairs creaked around me. "Mr. Harrington," I said softly, "do you even know what stability costs?" Silence swallowed the room. Walter blinked, the smirk faltering just slightly before returning. "Ah," he murmured, "the sister speaks." I smiled, not at him, but at Riley, her eyes filled with fear and something she was desperate to hide. I sat again, calm as stone. He thinks this is about pride, I thought, but this is about foundation, and his is about to crack. Somewhere in the distance, a phone buzzed. Walter reached into his pocket, frowning. A single notification glowed on the screen. Denver Daily Investigations. Harrington Mining Investigation reopened. My smile didn't fade. It simply deepened, quiet, certain, inevitable. The night the mine collapsed still claws at my memory. The sirens, the shouting, the smell of coal and dust cutting through the winter air. I was 17, standing behind the chain-link fence, my hands frozen against the metal while ambulances wailed into the dark. They said no one was left inside, but I knew my parents hadn't made it out. Someone shouted from the pit. The roof gave in. The beams weren't reinforced. But the next morning, the headline told a prettier story. "Natural quake causes tragic accident." I walked into the Harrington mining office with the article still folded in my hand. A man behind the desk didn't even look up. He said, "You should move on, kid." Harrington paid enough. He didn't see me snatch the report off his desk. The ink was faint, but one line burned through the page. "Approved for cost reduction. W. Harrington." That was the day I stopped believing in accidents. Years passed in fragments, steel dust, concrete, the sound of drills and my sister's laughter echoing through a cheap apartment. I built bridges by day and raised Riley by night, feeding her on noodles and borrowed dreams. She learned to draw and dream. I learned to stop. Now the photo of our parents sits on my desk, light flickering across their faces like fire trapped behind glass. If he built his empire on broken beams, I whisper, I'll be the one to bring it down. My phone buzzes. Riley's message glows bright against the dark screen. "Claire, Derek proposed. You'll love his family." My hand tightens until my palm stings. She doesn't know. She's marrying the son of the man who killed our parents. The Harrington estate gleamed, something built to impress, all glass walls and vineyard views. The air smelled of polished wealth, sweet and sterile. At the center of it all sat Walter Harrington, his confidence as heavy as the gold watch on his wrist. He studied me with that slow, measuring look people use when they've already decided you don't belong. "A civil engineer, you said?" he asked, swirling his wine. "So you build things that eventually collapse." I met his gaze. only when people removed the supports. His smile froze, then returned thinner this time. We both knew what I meant. On the wall behind him hung a framed family portrait. Walter, his wife, Derek, and behind them the same mountain ridge where the mine had caved in. The chandelier's reflection sliced across the photo, a streak of light splitting the image like a fracture in glass. He'd placed it there on purpose, a silent declaration. I won. Dinner continued. Conversations were polite but sharp. When it ended, I stepped out into the cold. Derek followed, his hands buried in his coat pockets. "He's hard to deal with," he said quietly, "but he's not all bad." I turned toward him. "You've never seen the beams from the inside, have you?" I left him standing there, the glow from the house spilling onto the snow like cracks spreading from a broken foundation. Back home, I opened my laptop. The screen lit the dark room, lines of text scrolling fast until one file caught my eye. Site report, Rocky Ridge Extension. A new site, a new sin. 2 weeks before the wedding, my office lights hummed against the dark. The Rocky Ridge Extension blueprint glowed on the screen. Load bearing compromised. Reinforcement skipped. Supervisor approval, W. Harrington. I sent it to Lennox. His reply came fast. "If this checks out, it's homicide." That afternoon, Riley called in tears. "Why did you tell a reporter about Dad's company? Who told you that? Derek heard rumors. You're trying to ruin him." "I'm not ruining anyone," I said. "I'm rebuilding what they broke." She hung up. The silence left a crater between us. Hours later, Lennox's email arrived. Follow the money. 3.2 million vanished from an environmental fund to a Bohemian account. "They died for $3 million, I whispered to my parents' photo. That night, an envelope waited under my door, a map of a new mine, red zones marked unsafe. Scrawled beneath, "He's doing it again." I found Riley later, forcing a smile. "Mr. Harrington's paying for our honeymoon." "Then he's buying your silence." The light fractured through the glass door as she shut it. Back home, I traced in red ink, stress point, glass point, failure line. Below, I wrote WH. The cracks had formed. A week later, Riley twirled in her wedding gown. "You'll look perfect," Derek said. My phone buzzed. "SECC confirms investigation," I murmured. "Right on schedule." That night, Derek came by. "If you know something about my father, tell me. Would you still marry someone who profits from the dead?" He said nothing. The next morning, Riley confronted me. "You're obsessed. You can't let it go." "Time doesn't bury truth. It exposes what wasn't built right." Then Lennox called. "Walter knows." "Then he's looking in the wrong place," I replied. Later, Mark Dalton whispered, "He's laundering through Riley's name." My stomach dropped. I wrote in my journal, "If I stop now, he wins. If I continue, she suffers. Justice always breaks something." Snow fell. I texted Lennox. "Wedding day, 2:15 p.m. When he toasts." Before dawn, I left my father's pencil beside Riley's bed. Engraved, "Build to last." You don't know it yet, but this time, I'm building for both of us. 3 days before the wedding, I drove to the outskirts of Denver and stood before the old Harrington mine. The air was damp and bitter, thick with the smell of rust and earth. Cracked walls, metal beams eaten by time. Everything looked the same as it had that night, only quieter. I ran my fingers over a faint engraving still clinging to the stone. "Safety first." "You forgot your own words," I whispered. "Walter." Back at my apartment, my desk had become a war map. Blueprints, schedules, lines connecting faces, accounts, and dates. Every piece fit together like steel under tension. My laptop screen glowed as Lennox's face appeared on a video call. "Are you sure about the timing?" "He'll raise his glass at 2:15, I said. "Make sure the world is watching." At that same hour, an anonymous email landed in Walter's inbox. SEC knows. Within minutes, his office became a storm. He ordered a full systems audit, tearing through old servers, including the one I'd once used. He found nothing. I had erased every trace years ago. The evidence now lived only where no one could delete it. That evening, Riley came to my door. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "Derek says the company's in trouble. He said, 'It's you. Please, Claire, if you love me, stop. You'll destroy us.' I can't stop what started 20 years ago," I said. "I'm rebuilding what was destroyed." She stared at me, frightened, realizing she no longer recognized the sister who had raised her. The next morning, I sent Walter a wedding gift, an elegant silver frame holding a photograph of the collapsed mine. Behind the glossy surface, faintly visible, was an overlay of his offshore transfers to the Bahamas. On the back, I'd engraved one line: "Foundations don't lie." The hidden lens inside the frame would capture his face when he opened it. That afternoon, he summoned me to a downtown cafe. "You think you can fight me with paper?" he said, voice low, eyes sharp. "I bury people with paper." "Not this time," I replied evenly. "This time, the paper signs your fall." His smile turned cold. "When foundations collapse, everything above goes with them, even your sister." He left. I sat alone, the wind pushing dust through the open door like the faint crumble of rock before a cave-in. Minutes later, Lennox called. "Claire, someone sold our timeline. Another outlet's about to publish early." "Then move it up," I said. "He'll make his toast at 1:45. Adjust the clock." Only I knew the new schedule. That night, I unlocked my father's old safe, laying his drafting pencil beside the faded construction permit for the Harrington mine. On the last page of my notebook, I wrote, "Blueprint of justice, cracks aligned, collapse imminent." The lamplight caught the edges of the drawing, spreading across the page like sunlight on stone. The foundation was ready to fall. Snow drifted like ash beyond the balcony rail as I sat with my phone in hand. A message from Lennox blinked across the screen. "Files scheduled. Countdown starts at 13:45 tomorrow." I typed back, "When he raises his glass, the world will know." The snow melted in my palm before I wiped it away. A soft knock came at the door. Riley stood there in her silk robe, her face pale and restless. "I can't sleep. Dad's worried. Derek's scared. Tell me this is all just a misunderstanding." "It's not," I said gently. "Tomorrow isn't about hate. It's about truth. But truth hurts. So does every reconstruction." Her lip trembled, but she said nothing more. She turned and left, closing the door between us for what we both knew would be the last time. Across the hall, Walter sat in his suite, his voice hard as he spoke into the phone. "There's talk of an SEC alert. Sir, should we cancel the ceremony?" "No," he answered. "Tomorrow, I'll make my toast and remind them who owns the ground they stand on." He wired money to silence a journalist, unaware the files had already moved to international servers. Around midnight, Derek found the folder his father had hidden in the study. Inside were forged signatures, his and Riley's, used to authorize illegal transfers. He stared at the pages, stunned. He used me. He used her. He came to my door, knocking softly. "You were right. Then tomorrow," I told him, "stay silent. Let the ground collapse." When he left, I went to the bathroom and met my reflection in the mirror. Pale, sleepless eyes, hair falling across my face. I was 17 when the ground fell once. Tomorrow, I'll make sure it's the last time it ever does. A flash of lightning split the sky. The mirror trembled in its frame, fractured by the sound. Before dawn, I found a folded note slipped under my door, Riley's handwriting. "Whatever happens tomorrow, please don't forget I love you." I didn't cry. I folded the note carefully and tucked it into my coat pocket. When morning came, the snow had stopped. Sunlight spread across the mountain peaks, clean and blinding. On the table beside me sat a single glass of red wine, still untouched. I lifted it slightly, whispering, "For you, Mom. For you, Dad. For truth." Somewhere in the valley below, church bells began to ring, the sound of a wedding or a warning. The ballroom in Aspen gleamed white and perfect, sunlight bouncing off glass and marble. Guests laughed softly, cameras flashed, violins sang through the air. Only I sat still, my glass untouched, waiting for 1:45. Walter straightened his tie, lifted his wine, and smiled at the crowd. To Riley and Derek, may your marriage stand stronger than some foundations we've seen before. Laughter rippled like static. Riley's shoulders stiffened. I rose slowly. The light caught my silver dress as I spoke, calm and clear. You talk about foundations, Mr. Harrington, but do you even know what keeps the ground stable? He smirked. An engineer's lesson, is it? I set my glass down hard. You built your empire on hollow ground. I'm here to make sure it collapses. His phone buzzed. His face drained of color. Behind him, the wedding screen flickered, now flashing headlines. Harrington Mining under federal investigation. Documents, transfers, signatures. His crimes laid bare. You used my name for this, Derek shouted. Walter said nothing. Riley sobbed. I stepped forward. My parents died because you chose profit over safety. Today, truth weighs more than your gold. Walk away, Riley, I told her softly. She took Derek's hand, and they left. The room fell silent. Walter slumped, wine spilling like blood across white linen. As I walked past, cameras clicked. By morning, that photo would tell the whole story. Rain traced thin silver lines across the window. The city outside blurred beneath the storm. The TV murmured in the background until a familiar name cut through the static. Walter Harrington detained by federal authorities following the release of incriminating evidence. The SEC and FBI confirm multiple accounts under investigation. I turned it off. Silence filled the room, soft but heavy. On the table sat my father's old drafting pencil, its metal edges worn smooth. They finally saw what you saw, Dad, I whispered. The front door burst open. Riley stood there, eyes swollen, breath shaking. You destroyed my husband's family. You humiliated us. No, Riley, I said quietly. I stopped pretending your happiness wasn't built on lies. She threw a newspaper onto the table. Walter in handcuffs stared back at us. You could have told me. Would you have listened? We looked at each other, and in that silence, love and grief wrestled until neither could win. My phone rang. Lennox's voice came through, steady. It's done. The trust's been reinstated. The company will rebuild under a new name, Pedden Memorial Fund. Then the ground finally holds, I said. Later, a message blinked on my screen. I finally understand. You didn't destroy us. You rebuilt us. Thank you for giving me something solid to stand on. I smiled, small, quiet, the first one since the mine collapsed. Stepping onto the balcony, I watched the rain ease, the city lights glinting through glass. Justice doesn't roar. It settles quietly, like the earth after a quake. A year later, the old mine had become a sanctuary. Wild grass covered what once was rubble, and a marble monument stood in its place. Pedden Memorial Trust, built from truth. I knelt before it, laying a bundle of white lilies on the stone. The wind was soft. The air smelled of new earth. Pulling my father's drafting pencil from my pocket, I etched a small line beneath the engraving, built to last. Birdsong carried through the quiet valley. Lennox's footsteps approached behind me. Do you regret it? He asked. No, I said, still looking at the stone. You can't rebuild without breaking first. He handed me an envelope. Riley wanted you to have this. Inside, her handwriting flowed steady and sure. I'm naming our first daughter, Clara, after you. I want her to know what true foundation means. My eyes stung. I folded the letter gently, whispering, then the name will stand strong. As I walked away, the sunrise spilled gold over the mountains. The snow melted, water tracing clean paths through the soil. Earth reborn. They called it revenge. I called it restoration.